Welcome back to the Forward Party podcast, where we highlight the people and ideas pushing American democracy in a better direction. In this episode, we're heading to the front lines of reform, our states. While national politics often feel stuck, real change is taking root at the state and local levels through special elections, grassroots organizing, and new approaches to candidate recruitment. We'll start with Michelle Quist from Utah, who's leading our state party there and is rethinking how special elections are run and how independent candidates can step up to serve. Then we'll hear from Kayla Sullivan, a Forward Party organizer in South Carolina, who managed the successful mayoral campaign of Jay Doyle in Georgetown and is working to engage young voters and future leaders. Finally, we'll talk to Rick Kennedy, a longtime ballot access advocate in Texas, about the barriers independent candidates still face and what it will take to give voters more choice at the ballot box. Lasting reform doesn't start in Washington. It starts in communities. Let's dive in. Today on the Forward Party podcast, we are thrilled to welcome Utah Forward Party Chair Michelle Quist. We met Michelle when she was running for Attorney General, actually as a representative of the United Utah Party. And Michelle was absolutely instrumental in the merger that the Forward Party had with the United Utah Party. That merger and Michelle's leadership ultimately inspired a sitting state senator in the Utah Senate to leave the Republican Party, stand on the steps of the Capitol building in Salt Lake and announce that he was now joining the Forward Party. So, and since then, we've continued to have adventures with Senator Thatcher and Michelle, and we're thrilled to have you on today to talk about all of that. Michelle, thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So I'd love to talk a little bit about the merger with UUP and your candidacy for Attorney General. So you have both been leading in a volunteer capacity, but you've also run as a candidate.
Yes, absolutely. You know, I knew that I wanted to make a difference and that I didn't belong really in either party. You know, just as you all spoke earlier, I had tried to make a difference in the party for so long and just felt like I was banging my head against a wall, and it had made no difference for so long. And I, you know, I'm an attorney, and so I ran for Attorney General, and I wanted to reach the most people and make the biggest difference. And that opportunity came with the United Utah Party. And eventually, I realized that the United Utah Party and the Forward Party of Utah we had the same message, and we were reaching out to the same people with the same values, and that it just made sense that we came together with that shared goal and the shared message and the shared vision, because you know, we were both doing the same thing to the same people with the same resources, and that we would make a bigger impact doing it together.
And yeah, and then talk about, so you guys, you brokered this incredible merger, which I just think that in and of itself is so special, because in politics, people equate politicians and politics with big ego. And it required a lot of ego and personality being set to the side in service of something greater and bigger. And so talk to us about how that inspired Dan Thatcher.
Yeah, no, I don't think our best leaders are always those that put their ego aside. And I think that, you know, we can see that in Senator Thatcher. He has always made the best decisions in his legislation by not following his ego and following not only his constituents, but those who can't speak for himself. And I think that's why the people loved him so much, was because he spoke for those who couldn't and were afraid to speak for themselves. And the Republican Party, he was part of the Republican Party, often, you know, let these ignored certain populations and ignored civil rights of certain populations and ignored individual rights of certain populations. And Dan recognized that the Forward Party really believed in standing up for not only individual rights, but constitutional rights. And it wasn't okay for him to allow individual rights and constitutional rights to go by the wayside when it was convenient for certain legislation. He was principled, and principles mattered to Senator Thatcher, even if it wasn't convenient. And so he stood up for those rights and those principles, and he noticed that that was important to the Forward Party. And so when he recognized, that was the legislation that he had always either brokered or, followed in his career as a Republican. And when he realized that the Republican Party wasn't following that anymore, he realized that he had to leave, and that the Forward Party was the only party that was standing by the principles of the Constitution and individual rights. And he wanted to make a not only, be principled and stay true to his own principles, but to send a message to the people of Utah and to the nation and say, we can do better. We can have good government, and we can, it's time to step out of this two-party system because it's not meeting the needs of the people anymore. And so that's what he did.
Michelle, having had the opportunity and the privilege of spending some time with all of you out there, I would like you, because I use you all as an example of what makes Forward so different. I'd like you to take us through the process that led you to decide to do something entirely different, something that's never been done before in the state of Utah, and frankly, I don't think anywhere else, where a party gave up the opportunity to have their special person appointed for a seat that opened up. So if you could take us through what got you all to decide when Senator Thatcher stepped down, and again, an example of his principle. He knew he was being pushed, and he'd had some challenges, so for the good of all, he stepped aside. What led you all to agree to hold an election?
Well, it's the same idea of these are our principles, and we want to show the world that these are our principles. So Utah law allows a party during a midterm vacancy to send a name of a replacement to the governor, and the governor simply appoints the party's representative to that midterm vacancy.
It doesn't feel very democratic.
Absolutely not. What ends up happening is it's just cronyism, right? It's not democracy. It's not election. It's just party bosses and cronyism. And that felt foreign to us. And what ends up happening is the Republicans and the Democrats in the state have delegates. It's a delegate system. And they have 20, 30, maybe 40 people in a district, elect. It's really just these party bosses, and send a name to the governor. And then that is an entire district senator for the rest of the term. And that just didn't sit right with us. So rather than appointing and sending a name to the governor, which was our right, like you said, we decided to hold an election, a preference ballot, and for the entire Senate district. And this was, 60,000 people in the Senate district that had the opportunity, received a ballot in the mail. We didn't confine it to only Forward Party members. We opened up it to anyone in the district.
That's incredible.
Republicans, Democrats, unaffiliated, anybody had the opportunity. If they didn't receive a ballot in the mail, they could go online and say, this is my address, prove that they've lived in the district, and cast their preference ballot to say, this is who we want. We opened it up to anybody who could join the Forward Party, even if they hadn't been a Forward Party member before, apply to be one of those candidates, and then they could be voted on. We just thought that showed that we are who we are and our principles, that we believe in democracy and in individual rights. This is who we are, that we aren't a party of cronyism and party bosses, and that's what we wanted to do. It doesn't make sense that 20 or 30 people should appoint a senator for an entire district to fill out the rest of a midterm vacancy. And so we ran that great experiment, and we thought it was a success. And now the entire Senate District 11 in Utah is represented by Senator Emily Buss, and she will represent the Forward Party and Senate District 11, every voter in Senate District 11, and she'll represent them well.
And what kind of a response did you get from the district? What did people vote? I mean, did you get a good turnout on the vote, and did they recognize how radical this was?
They did vote. It's hard in a November-December period to get people to understand what's going on and to participate. Obviously, we wanted, 30-40% of the district, and we didn't get that. It was single-digit participation, but it was more, we got, I forget the number, but it was almost 2% of the district, which is, over 1,000 voters, as opposed to under 100. Which would have participated if we would have chosen them. And it was more than just Forward Party members. It was open to anybody who wanted to participate. And for us, that's a success.
So, Michelle, I understand also that you've inspired a lot of people to run for office now in Utah under the Forward banner.
Yes, we have. We have 26 candidates right now. Utah has a very early filing deadline. The deadline has already passed. They have it before the legislature starts. There will be one more filing deadline in March for the congressional seats, so we could have a few more candidates file. But right now we have 26 candidates who have filed for state office here. And, some of them, all of them, we're super proud to have filed for Forward Party. We have the son of a stalwart GOP legislator who represented the state for decades. We have, Senator Buss, who is running for re-election. We have, county candidates and state candidates and representatives and senators. And we're super excited for the election season, and we've already had a meeting with all the candidates, and we're, teaching them how to run campaigns and how to raise funds and, what resources that we'll be able to help them with and how they can help themselves. And we're excited for the campaign season. What's interesting here is that there are more independents or not unaffiliated voters than there are Democrats. And the Democrats in Utah were very aggressive to file in almost every seat this season. But what we found is that they turned around and immediately started asking the Forward Party for our endorsement. And many of them are saying that they're just placeholder candidates and they really align with what the Forward Party values are, but they were just asked at the last minute to run as a Democrat. And so the messaging is super interesting here in the state this election season, because it's the Forward Party values align with what voters here in Utah feel. And we see that across the country, right? Many voters don't like this two-party system and want more. And they're feeling that here in Utah too. And even the Democrats who have filed for office are, turning around and telling us, I ran just because they asked me to run at the last minute, but I really wish I had run with you, and will you endorse me? And so it's an interesting dichotomy that they're coming to us with here after the filing season has closed.
So for the people who are running as Forward candidates, talk to me a little bit about what kind of issues brought them to the public sphere. Like, why are they taking this great personal risk and making the sacrifice of being a candidate at this moment in time? What's so important to them that they want to talk about?
Yeah, housing is a big issue here in Utah, but they're also really concerned about the political rhetoric. They're concerned about the partisan, the partisan back and forth, that it doesn't go anywhere. They're concerned about, the issues that we talk about here in Forward often. They're concerned about individual rights. They're concerned about constitutional issues that seem to be being trampled on every day. These are the things that are overarching that they've come, that helped them turn towards, maybe I should do this. But why people run is always what hits them at home, right? Like the personal issues that affect people personally. Like if I have one candidate who has a disabled child and they have issues getting DSPD funds. DSPD is a state level Medicaid like funds here in Utah, and so they really have issues with funding levels here in Utah, and so it's how political issues affect you personally that cause you to turn to government and ask yourself, why isn't government working for my family? And then they turn and say, maybe I can make a difference.
Michelle, your leadership in Utah has been so extraordinary, and all eyes are on Utah this year as they were last year. So thank you so much for your extraordinary commitment to this cause. You are a patriot, and we are so glad you are here today.
Thank you so much. I'm super, we're excited to be part of the forward movement, and we know that there's a movement forward, and we're glad to keep it rolling.
Thanks for your leadership.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Michelle.
Have a great day.
You too.
Okay, for our viewers and listeners out there, we are thrilled to have with us today Kayla Sullivan, who is a Forward Party organizer out of Pawleys Island, South Carolina. Kayla served as Jay Doyle's campaign manager. So Jay Doyle, the forward-serving mayor of Georgetown, South Carolina, first elected official in the state of South Carolina, elected outside of the two-party system, not a Republican, not a Democrat, since 1894. And Kayla is the one who architected the campaign and the race, and we are just thrilled to have her here today. Last time I saw Kayla was at Jay's swearing in.
Oh yeah, and I meant to email you that it was very nice to meet you. You're really cool.
I think you're really cool. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you.
So, Kayla, had you run a campaign before?
No, ma'am.
And you take on this race. Tell us about it.
First off, I was wildly unqualified. For some background into me, which will provide better context, I am completing my undergraduate studies. I'm a little bit late on that. I was starting off as biology pre-med. I did 3.5 years of that. And then I changed my major, hence why I'm 27 finishing my poli-sci major. But all of the work I had done in politics and for the Forward Party, it had been very minor, minuscule stuff. So whenever I got on to Jay's campaign, I originally was his social media manager. And I did about 2 months of that. And I was in my kitchen one day, I think it was like July or August, he called me and he was like, "Do you want to be my campaign manager?" And I was like, "You are in over your head, sweetheart. I don't think you understand the parameters of that job description." And he was like, "Well, you tell me what to do anyway, and you pretty much check all the boxes. I think that this is right for you, and I think you can help." And I said, "Okay, sure." And him being a first-time candidate and me being a first-time campaign manager, it was very much, it felt like on-the-job training. It kind of felt like the blind leading the blind, but we collaborated with whatever strengths we had, and we got it done.
Kayla, that sounds like leadership to me, honestly. I mean, I don't think there's ever an opportunity that comes up that a person looks at themselves and says, yeah, I'm fully qualified to do this. And I just want to give you great kudos for jumping in and learning on the job and accomplishing something no one had done since the 1800s. So that is that's quite something to be proud of. And you'll look back on that when you're managing perhaps a presidential campaign in your future, and you'll say, I started out with a mayoral race out in South Carolina.
So what got you interested in Forward to begin with? How did you come to Forward? And then how did you then obviously linked up with Jay through that?
So the state lead for Forward, Clint, he got a hold of me, I think, in 2021. And this came out of an open primaries called, after COVID and stuff. They did a lot of online forums, and I was on open primaries, independentvoting.org and all that. I've been an independent my entire life. My ethnic background does have a little to do with that. I'm a biracial living in South Carolina. I've always felt on the outskirts of things, yada, yada. So I've been an independent since I could conceptualize politics. So I decided, me changing to the poli-sci major, and then I was like, maybe I'll get involved with some groups. I didn't know any local groups around here for independence. So I went to online forums, and I was participating in this one forum for open primaries, and they were commenting. Well, they said, hey, can you all comment, your location, where you're calling in from? And I commented, I'm in Pawleys Island, South Carolina. And Clint, my state lead, he lives out of Charleston. And he messaged me privately, and he said, hey, I'm also in your area. I'd like to talk to you about some volunteer work and stuff, because I wanted to volunteer. I was rather bored at that point in time. And against my better judgment and my mother's warning about strangers on the internet, I said, sure, you can call me. That's fine. And he called me right after the meeting. And I was like, forward, because I had dealt with Andrew Yang's campaign before. That's part of my miscellaneous volunteer work from back in the day, like 2020. So I was more easily on board because I was former Yang gang, we should say.
Wonderful. What were the biggest challenges you found? And besides climbing the mountain of learning what you were supposed to do, but in the campaign itself?
Other people taking me seriously, like people on the outside, because I am 20-something years old.
Right.
That was a problem, but that problem has since been resolved.
Winning does that, Kayla.
Yeah.
Winning does do that. Everyone changes their minds very quickly. I got a lot of, oh, well, I wasn't sure at first. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you weren't, because I remind you of your niece, not a competitor. But.
And so tell us about how the idea of a forward party campaign was received in your town. I mean, they weren't accustomed to that, obviously. It wasn't something they'd seen before. How did you explain it? How did people think about it?
So Georgetown is kind of odd. Georgetown had historically only Democratic mayorship until the last mayor, the one that we just took out. She was a Republican. And it's a very African-American heavy town. And they just weren't voting. They weren't showing up. The age-old story. But one part, we went out to them, and I hate to describe it as us advertising as we're not the immediate opposition, but more of a middle ground solution. And then for the Republicans, it was kind of the same thing. We're not your immediate opposition. We're not wearing the jersey. It's just common sense. A lot of these people did vote for Jay, but they would not put his signs in their yard because it's a very small southern town. Everyone's very well connected. So if you had Jay's sign in your yard, it's like, oh, you voted against so-and-so. Why would you do that? So he got a lot of, I don't want to say closeted support, but that's exactly what happened. And we were okay with that. You still voted for me, so I don't care.
And what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced? Was that kind of the biggest, of people not understanding the forward party, or was it more they're being afraid of going against the traditional duopoly?
Going against the traditional duopoly, the good old boy stuff, and the politicians, the local politicians here, there's overlap with the real estate companies. And down here, that's a very big thing. Development, the realtors, and the former mayor herself was a real estate agent. So that is what we were going against. That was the difficult part. They had the funding, the money immediately. Jay paid out of pocket for most of his expenses. But luckily for him, he was able to do so. But for a lot of other candidates nationwide, that's just not a thing. So that was part of the leg up, I should say.
And what do you think it was about Jay's message that brought him over the finish line? Why were people willing to secretly support him over the other candidates?
I hate to say, well, he's pretty much a straight shooter. I was hesitant at first to deal with him. I met him on a video call, and I was sitting here like, this man is from Massachusetts. I said, you are a Yankee running for mayor of Georgetown. I said, what are we doing? And here I am. So clearly, whatever he said worked on me too.
Well,
But
I'll be right down. I'm coming right down now.
But very straight to the point. He doesn't really like to dance around details. As a matter of fact, he'll give you more details than what you ask for. But like, he puts it in a way where the common man and woman can understand, and he's not being condescending. So I think that was a great asset of his personality.
We keep talking about authenticity and how much, Americans and voters are craving authenticity from their leadership, and Jay certainly provides that. Kayla, what would you say to other young people around the country? And I'll make this appeal, especially to young women. We need more strong women in positions of political office, but also in campaign and political leadership in general. What would you say, given your experience, to other young women around the country right now who are perhaps a little curious, but thinking as you thought, well, I've never done this before, that it's insurmountable?
I would say, because obviously as a young woman or a young person in general, we are already told by society, hey, this is going to be a problem for you. Don't make it a problem or a thing, a voice you hear in the back of your head that your age or your gender is going to be a problem. It's not going to be a problem unless you make it a problem or if you address it. Someone may come out of left field, but that's literally not your problem. Do whatever you have to do. No one 9 times out of 10 is not going to immediately get in your way. And if they do, paper trail. Always get everything in writing.
So do you have the bug now? You've got
Absolutely.
the political bug?
I'm already working with a candidate for Horry County Council. I have her, and then we have another one, potential. Well, no, he actually just signed for Horry County. So we have 2 for sure, and then we have 2 others that we have to, nail down.
All right, candidates in South Carolina, we have a professional campaign manager now to help you in your candidacy. No excuse. Get in there, file and run. Kayla, thank you for joining us today. And thank you for all of your energy and enthusiasm and vision. It's greatly appreciated, and we all really draw from it a lot.
Thanks for taking the chance.
Congratulations.
Thank you for making the jump.
Bye, Kayla.
Bye, y'all.
Our next guest today on the Forward Party podcast is Forward Party Texas State Chair Rick Kennedy. Now, all eyes this year have been on Texas as we look at Governor Abbott's attempt to gerrymander the state. And Rick has been an extraordinary leader on that issue and other ballot reform measures in the state of Texas. We're so glad to have him on today. Hey, Rick, how are you?
I'm doing great, Lindsay. How are you? And thanks for having me on.
Good. We're thrilled you're here. We've got Lieutenant Governor Healy and Governor Whitman here. And talk to us about the climate in Texas surrounding the attempts for gerrymandering in this last year.
Well, it's a done deal. The gerrymandering is complete, and the climate is almost one of resignation. This is business as usual here in Texas, right? It's the party in power has always sought to stay in power as long as they can. They pull every lever they can possibly pull, and this year, of course, at the behest of President Trump, more than anything else, they pulled a lever to increase the or to try at least to increase the representation of the Republican Party in the U.S. Congress.
Rick, walk us through that. Help us understand what the gerrymandering is going to likely accomplish and how Forward might play a role in trying to counteract that.
The goal was to redistrict and pick up 5 additional congressional seats for the Republican Party. There's some theories out there that it might backfire a little bit because they made otherwise, to do that, they made otherwise safe Republican seats a little less safe to try to pick up those 5. So we'll see how that works out. How we can, as a Forward Party, how can we try to counter this? We're going to we're going to try to support independent candidates in as many of these districts as we possibly can. Of course, candidates who are aligned with our values and with our priorities, not simply to disrupt what's going on. But if, the net effect of that could be to move some votes away from, again, what once was a safe Republican seat towards, away from the Republican, but hopefully not taking away from, say, the Democratic side of things, and make it a bit more competitive.
And how are you finding that? Are you finding a receptive audience? I mean, people don't think of Texas as anything but solid red these days. Are you finding this a huge uphill climb, or has this effort at redistricting opened people up more to saying, hey, wait a minute, this just isn't right, even though I'm a Republican?
I think it actually has. Texas is a huge uphill climb, no matter what. Just the way that they've got the barriers to ballot access, et cetera, for new parties, make it a very difficult place to launch a new effort such as this. However, we just had a statewide town hall last night, and I picked a few people at random to ask them why they were here. And the general consensus is that there's a sense of urgency, that there's a sense that there is something wrong, both here in Texas and at the federal level, and that something needs to be done about it. And this continued, and let's call it what it is, they're rigging elections, right? They're rigging general elections. So this continued attempt to rig general elections is only making that sense of urgency more strong.
And talk to us a little bit about some of the people who are coming out to run as independents for those seats.
So at the state level, Mike Collier is running as an independent for lieutenant governor. Mike is a two-time Democratic Party nominee for that seat, has become disillusioned with the whole two-party process and decided to go try it again as an independent this year. At the congressional level, we've got William Taggart, who is former Harris County Forward Party chair here in Texas. Resigned from that seat so that he could run for Congressional District 38 here in Texas. William is the author of the book Fixing America, and it's an extensive policy platform, if you will, captured in book 10. And we think
I've read it; it's fantastic.
It is fantastic, and we think he'll make a formidable candidate, even though it's a district that is now an empty seat. A vacant seat, and I think there are 11 Republicans in the Republican primary vying for that nomination, and 3 or 4 Democrats as well. But we think William can certainly be a disruptive force there.
Are you making any inroads in campuses? What about with young people at college campuses?
Yeah, not enough. In fact, it's something of a priority for us this year to identify especially younger folks who are disenchanted with the two-party system, and there's plenty of it here in Texas. My kids are that age, right? And my kids are just like the majority of kids in that age group. They're worried about being able to get a job. They're worrying about actually having a stable career. They're worried about being able to buy a home someday. They're worried about being able to afford to raise kids. All of these things that the kids in that cohort are concerned about. We've got all of our county chairs are scouring our voter registration rolls right now with the set of metrics looking for, again, these younger kids, either college age or just after, who are concerned about the future, both the state of our democracy as well as their own self-interest, and looking for ways to break in and establish my own footprint on campus and otherwise.
Rick, you all are about to have 2 highly contentious primaries for the United States Senate on the Republican and Democratic sides, and you could conceivably end up with Jasmine Crockett as the Democratic nominee and Ken Paxton as the Republican nominee, who are pretty polar opposites, leaving a huge swath in the middle. How do you think that's going to impact the performance of your independent candidates in some of these down ballot seats?
I think, given the profile of those 2 potential nominees, if it actually does boil out that way, I think it's just going to be exemplary of how the 2 legacy parties have gone to the extremes, and will just open people's minds more to looking for an alternative up and down the ballot. Of course, that's at the Senate level, and there won't be an alternative, a viable alternative to those 2 at the Senate level. But there's a mindset down here that I really do believe is opening up and looking for some sort of moderating influence in what's going on.
Rick, some of the people listening today might be in states where they don't have state leads yet, or they're just building out their state leadership, and they might be interested in participating in some other way. How did you make that decision to jump in and lead Texas? And how do you what recommendations do you have for people who'd like to get involved?
For somebody who's in a state that doesn't have a state lead yet, of course, contact Lindsay at National, right, and express interest, or look at the websites.
Yeah, that would
Lindsay
work.
at forwardparty.com.
There you go. Or look at the website and contact Rick.Kennedy at texasforwardparty.org and for some guidance about how to get involved, how to launch from nothing. The way I got involved was way back in 2021. I saw Andrew announce the founding of the Forward Party, and quite frankly, I didn't pay a lot of attention at that point. I considered myself retired from politics at that point. And a couple of months later, for no apparent reason, I looked at the website and I saw that Texas was having its first statewide meeting a couple of days later. And I thought to myself, I got nothing else to do. Let's see what these guys are up to. Needless to say, 4 years later, here I am. And, I got pulled into it from that perspective, mostly because I liked what I heard. And again, I'm just one of millions here in Texas who think that there's an acute need for some moderating influence, for some alternative to what's going on with the legacy two parties.
Rick, you've got a close relationship with a lot of the kind of nonpartisan structural democracy reform organizations in Texas. So, you were talking about moderating, opportunities to advance moderation. Independent candidates are one, but doing that in tandem with organizations that are actually trying to change our voting structures. Talk to us about those relationships and why they're important.
It's extremely important. For instance, influence or relationships with groups like instant runoff voting for Texas, and for builders and for March Matters, who are trying to encourage people to vote in the primaries, because a broader primary voting population would indicate or a desire for more moderate primary candidates, which is not what we get now. But by partnering with these organizations, we can amplify each other's messages. We can amplify each other's name recognition, issue recognition, and our essential mind space in the voters of here and the people of the voters here in Texas. So it's critical that we be in lockstep and, again, amplifying each other's messages and making sure that we're making as much of a collective impact as we possibly can.
Rick, for our listeners and the people who are watching, you might want to describe how the barriers that the two major parties have put up in Texas to keep independence and to keep the Forward Party off the ballot, how difficult they're making it.
They're making it about as difficult as any other state in the country, if not the most difficult state in the country to get on ballot. So to get ballot access for the party, we would have to gather just over 81,000 ink on paper signatures in a short 75-day period that starts after
85,000, more than 1,000
Wow.
signatures a day.
Yeah, that's 81,000 valid.
And you
of
have
course,
to,
you need a
and you
buffer.
actually have to gather twice as many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes, I was
Wow.
going to say you have to
Yeah,
gather
you have
even
to get
more.
more
of
than
those.
that.
You're going to
Yes.
throw them out.
Yes. Yep. About 60 at a
And-
minimum.
and what are the
1,600
two-
signatures a day.
And how different is that for a candidate of the Republican or the Democratic Party in Texas?
Oh, they're locked in. They don't have to do anything. They can.
You want to get on the ballot as a Republican or a
they-
Democrat? Is it different? And how different is it?
Yeah, all they have to do is file their intent to run with their state party chair. So you can either pay a filing fee and get your name on the primary ballot, or you can gather 500 signatures in your district and get your name on the primary ballot. And then, of course, if you're the nominee, you're automatically on the
500.
general
That's
election
100
ballot.
versus 80,000.
Yeah,
Incredible.
roughly.
I mean, 500 versus 80,000. That should be like the title of this episode for our podcast. It's crazy.
I mean, we're sorry to be
and-
laughing because you've got to collect the signatures, but it's such a great example of how the two-party duopoly has just tried to make it so that no one can compete with them. They don't have to serve the people because they aren't accountable. They have just eliminated competition, and that message alone should help you win.
Yep, that's it. You've nailed it right there.
Well, Rick, thank you for everything that you have continued to build in Texas. Rick Kennedy is just such a shining example of the kind of leaders we have in the States where it is, I mean, you think that the odds are stacked against you and he keeps showing up and fighting day after day after day. And the number of independents you have running on the ballot is proof of all the work that you've done, Rick. So thank you so much for coming today and thank you for your incredible leadership in Texas.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you all.
Thank you
for
very
having
much.
me. Appreciate your time.
When Governor Whitman, you talk about the policy platform at Ford and the importance of building from the ground up, you will often reference that, you know, the needs of the state of New Jersey and communities in New Jersey are different than the needs of the state of Arizona and the voters in Arizona. What an example of that today with Michelle in Utah, Rick in Texas, and Kayla in South Carolina. It's not just that the needs of the constituents and the voters in those communities are so different, but actually the structural barriers to introduce competition vary so much state by state.
And people don't understand that. I mean, they really don't, which is why I'm glad Rick got into that, because it's mind-boggling and eye-opening when people realize just the kind of control that the duopoly, that the two major parties have, and how absolutely committed they are to keeping anybody else from participating in the process.
And just the mere fact that Kayla helped Jay Doyle break a two-party duopoly marathon since the 1800s to be elected as mayor is in itself a testament to how hard it is, right?
Absolutely.
To be an independent, to be a third-party candidate of any variety. And I also love that all of these volunteers, and they're all super volunteers, or people from states that were monolithically, one party or the other.
Absolutely.
Right?
All three states featured today.
All three states were absolutely stacked against the other party. In fact, in most cases, the Democratic Party had just, almost gone to nothingness, obscurity, so that people only had one choice on the ballot. And so Ford's really offering a second choice in these races. And I think that's a fantastic opportunity for our candidates to get out there. And I also just wanted to say that I see the emergence now of the infrastructure that you always talk about, Lindsay, that independent candidates and Ford candidates need infrastructure in order to succeed. And so young people like Kayla who just take that big jump and say, hey, I can manage a mayoral candidacy. I'll try it. Why not? I haven't done it before. I'll try. That's how we build that reservoir of fundraisers and campaign managers and tech people and all the kinds of consultants that our candidates are going to need. People just have to take a chance and believe in themselves and get out there and do it.
And they've seen it's not impossible with her example. It is not impossible. And then you look at Rick in a very, very red state, willing to take it on for the good of the state, the good of the people of Texas, because they need a choice. And I forget who it was that mentioned how many seats were empty as well. Which of the three of them mentioned that there were a bunch of empty seats, because that's the other thing we're seeing. Not only are the seats, only many of them, 70% in any given election, are only one candidate, so voters have no choice, where we're the second party, the second choice, but that 5 to 10% of those seats are never filled, and that's just wrong. I mean,
or if they're filled, talking about Michelle, about how they're filled by the party bosses. She used the term cronyism, and that's not unique to Utah. No. You look across the country at a lot of these vacancies, and actually the political parties themselves are filling the seats without holding an election, or you have a partisan governor who's filling the seat. 25% of the state legislature in Colorado is there by appointment. Nobody ran for the seat.
That was quite a surprise to me, because once you're there, the power of incumbency is such that you're not going anywhere.
Yep.
No.
In Massachusetts, it's nearly 100% reelection once you're in office. So you can be there for the rest of your life. And so if you have a party that is appointing 25% of the legislature, well, those folks are there permanently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, our state leads around the country are extraordinary. And I hope that listeners around the country today were inspired by what Kayla and Michelle and Rick are building. And it's proof. I mean,
And how
it's
they're
proof
building
that you
it.
could, and how they're building it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
our
that's great.
volunteers
Great.
are forward, right? We
Mhm.
are volunteers. Governor Whitman and I are volunteers,
Mhm.
and I continue to be inspired by what goes on a
Right.
state level and local level with our
It
forward.
reminds you that we're doing the right thing
Absolutely.
because they are so committed. You can't let them down.
No, we can't let them down. Don't let them down. Go to forwardparty.com, click on our map, click on your state, sign up, put your email in there, and Michelle or Rick or your state lead in your state is going to give you a call to get you involved at the Forward Party.